Imagine tripling your profits, sitting on over $15 billion in cash generation, and then Wall Street looks at your balance sheet and tells you your money is somehow worth less today than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, it sounds completely backward.
It really does. Welcome to this deep dive. It is early April 2026, and today we are unpacking a really fascinating puzzle surrounding one of the most recognizable companies on Earth, Netflix.
Right.
We're going to decode their current financial reality, figure out what actually drives the stock of a modern media giant, and analyze this massive strategic shockwave they just sent through the industry.
And that shockwave is really the anchor for everything we're going to discuss today, because back on February 26th, so just a little over a month ago, Netflix made the definitive choice to walk away from matching Paramount Skydance's bid to acquire Warner Bros. Discovery.
Wow.
I mean, they had the capital, they looked at the deal, and they just opted out.
Which sets up this incredible central paradox from our source notes. Like, I look at their trailing 12-month operating profit over the last 5 years, and it has nearly tripled. It rocketed from $5.6 billion to $15.3 billion.
Right.
And the stock itself is up 92% over that stretch, currently sitting around $99 a share. But it has completely failed to keep pace with that explosive profit growth.
It definitely has.
So Wall Street is supposed to be this machine that rewards pure profitability. So why is the market actively paying, a lower premium for every dollar Netflix earns today than it did half a decade ago?
Well, it's the ultimate dilemma for any company transitioning from a high-growth disruptor into a mature, dominant incumbent. The short answer is that Wall Street doesn't just grade tech giants on the absolute dollars they bring in, they grade them on the mechanics of their valuation.
Okay, so it's not just raw cash.
Exactly. The relative lag you're seeing comes down to the price-to-earnings ratio, or PE. 5 years ago, the market was so optimistic about Netflix's future expansion that they assigned it a PE ratio of 53 times earnings.
Meaning they willingly paid $53 upfront for every $1 of profit the company generated.
Yeah, exactly. But today, that multiple has compressed all the way down to 37 times.
That's a huge drop. Even with triple the actual profit dollars in the bank, the market is just slapping a massive discount on the sticker price of those dollars.
It is. The market re-rated Netflix because they separate absolute profit from profit momentum. Like, yes, sitting on $15.3 billion is a monumental achievement, but institutional investors operate on the second derivative.
Meaning they aren't just looking at your current speed.
Right. They are measuring how hard your foot is pressing the accelerator. If we look at the internal numbers, Netflix's quarter-over-quarter profit growth has decelerated from a peak of 13% back in Q1 of 2024 down to just 5% in early 2026.
And if you're looking at these numbers, you might be wondering why a 5% growth rate on top of billions in profit is treated like a failure. Think about it like driving a sports car at 150 miles per hour.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, so objectively, you're flying past the competition. But if you're buying a stock, you aren't just buying the current speed. You are buying the future distance that car can travel before running out of gas.
The potential.
Exactly. When your acceleration drops from 13% to 5%, Wall Street recalculates the math and realizes the total expected journey just got shorter. The underlying risk changes.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. I mean, when a company is growing at 13% quarter over quarter, they're proving there is still massive untapped white space in their market. Plenty of open road left to travel.
But slowing down to 5% signals that you've already captured the vast majority of your core demographic.
Exactly. From a risk perspective, future growth is suddenly going to be vastly more expensive and harder to come by. To measure how well a mature tech company navigates this exact transition, analysts rely on a metric called the Rule of 40.
Oh yeah, I saw the Rule of 40 all over our research for this deep dive. The basic formula seems simple enough. You add the year-over-year revenue growth percentage to the operating margin percentage. But why 40? What makes that specific number the holy grail for these companies?
Well, 40 is essentially the mathematical tipping point where software scale outpaces operational drag. In the tech and software space, acquiring users is incredibly expensive. You have marketing, server loads, content acquisition.
All those upfront costs.
Yeah. But once you clear that 40 combined threshold, it proves that your gross margins from sheer scale have finally outrun the cost of maintaining your infrastructure. It shows a company is in perfect, self-sustaining health, seamlessly balancing its continued growth with its underlying profitability without burning through cash.
And Netflix is currently sitting at 50%. So they aren't just clearing the bar, they are soaring over it.
They are. But the market's reaction to the fluctuations in that exact metric shows just how volatile expectations are at this level. If we look back at Q2 of 2025, their Rule of 40 metric surged to hit that 50% mark, and the market went absolutely wild. The stock rocketed 44% in a single quarter.
Wow. Adding nearly half your market cap in 3 months is staggering for a mature company.
It really is. But look what happened just 2 quarters later in Q4 of 2025. That momentum faded, the growth naturally ticked down slightly, and the stock suffered a brutal 22% drop.
So the PE multiple just rapidly compressed.
Yeah. It proves that when you are priced for absolute perfection, any slight deceleration in your growth rate triggers an institutional sell-off. The market gives and the market takes away very violently when you trade at premium multiples.
Which forces a massive pivot in their business model, I'd imagine, because that 5% growth rate we mentioned earlier is like a giant blinking warning light that they have saturated their core market.
Oh, absolutely. Netflix now has over 300 million paid members worldwide.
And there are only so many households with high-speed broadband on the planet, so organic subscriber growth inevitably hits a ceiling. They cannot rely on just adding new $15 subscriptions to feed the beast anymore.
Right. That reality forces them to find entirely new gears to reaccelerate growth. And you can see this structural shift clearly in their massive $43 billion revenue mix for fiscal year 2025.
All right, let's break that down.
So subscriptions still dominate the balance sheet, accounting for 91% of that pie, or about $39 billion.
But 91% means 9% is coming from somewhere else. And that is where the actual narrative of their future is hiding.
Precisely. Advertising is scaling up aggressively. It's currently hovering around 7% of their total revenue, but they are projecting a target of $3 billion in ad revenue for 2026.
$3 billion. That's massive.
Yeah, and they aren't just selling standard cheap banner ads. They're commanding premium CPMs, the cost per thousand impressions that advertisers are willing to pay.
I actually want to dig into the mechanics of that because the advertising space is notoriously crowded. How is Netflix walking into the ad market and immediately demanding premium rates from brands?
It really comes down to data and scarcity. First, Netflix has billions of proprietary data points on viewing habits, meaning they can offer advertisers incredibly granular targeting.
That makes sense. They know exactly what you're watching and when.
Right. But more importantly, their subscription tiers act as a built-in filter. The users who pay a premium to avoid ads filter themselves out of the pool.
Oh, interesting. So the users who remain on the ad-supported tier become this highly captive, highly measurable audience.
Exactly. Because the ad inventory is relatively scarce compared to traditional television and the environment is premium, brands are willing to pay top dollar just to get their commercials placed next to a hit show.
That's brilliant, honestly. They are weaponizing their own premium content to create ad scarcity.
They really are.
But there is a third bucket in that revenue mix, bringing in about $1 billion. And honestly, this one makes me highly skeptical. It's the merchandise, licensing, and these physical experiential retail locations they are calling Netflix houses.
Right.
Moving from a purely digital software margin into the messy, high-overhead world of physical brick-and-mortar retail seems like a dangerous distraction.
It does seem counterintuitive for a tech giant to build physical real estate, but you have to view it through the lens of their competitive moat. That moat is arguably the widest in the entire media industry.
Because they spend $20 billion annually on content.
Yes, but the real magic isn't just the shows they make, it's the invisible infrastructure delivering them. They spent over 15 years building the OpenConnect CDN, their proprietary content delivery network.
Which ensures the streams don't buffer. But how does that actually impact their financials? Like, how does that save them money?
By drastically cutting their transit costs. OpenConnect isn't just software, it's physical server boxes that Netflix provides directly to local internet service providers around the globe.
Really? Physical boxes?
Yeah, they cache their entire content library locally on these servers during off-peak hours. So when you hit play in London or Tokyo, the video isn't traveling halfway across the world, racking up massive global transit fees.
It's streaming from a box sitting just a few miles from your house.
Exactly. It drives the marginal cost of distribution to near zero for every additional view.
So they dodge the telecom tolls entirely. That's incredible.
It is. And that infrastructure efficiency allows them to achieve incredible financial discipline. They are systematically expanding their operating margins by about 2 percentage points every year, aiming for a massive 31.5% margin in 2026.
And they achieve this because their cash content spending grows significantly slower than their revenue. Like I saw right now, their ratio of cash content spend to income statement expense is 1.1 to 1.
Correct. They've reached a scale where they don't have to exponentially increase their $20 billion budget to keep 300 million subscribers happy.
Meaning, for every dollar they account for in content expenses, they're only actually laying out about $1.10 in hard cash.
Right. They maintain that baseline, and as they slowly raise subscription prices or scale ad revenue globally, almost all of that extra top-line growth drops straight to the bottom line as pure profit.
That transition is staggering when you step back and look at it. I mean, we all remember when Netflix was basically just a digital DVD library. You logged on, picked a movie, and logged off.
Totally.
But when you look at the premium ad tier, the physical retail locations, and their aggressive expansion into over 200 live events, we're talking global NFL games, a massive 10-year deal for WWE Raw, live boxing, even integrating podcasts with Spotify and Barstool, they are fundamentally a different beast. It feels less like a library and more like a global digital theme park.
Yeah, they are actively attempting to blur the lines of what a streaming service even is. When you offer bingeable series, live global sports, integrated video gaming, and podcasting all inside one single ecosystem, you are trying to monopolize a user's total attention.
Right. So is the ultimate strategy here to become the default screen you open? Are they trying to transition from what show should we watch to we never actually need to leave this app?
Exactly. You cease to be a utility where people watch a specific show, and you become a destination where people just spend their time.
But building and maintaining a global digital theme park requires an astronomical amount of organic capital.
Yep.
You have to constantly feed the machine to keep people inside the ecosystem,
You really do.
which logically connects to why they adopted such a defensive financial posture back in February, because you can't fund a $20 billion annual content habit and build real-world retail houses if you are drowning in acquisition debt.
That is the exact strategic causality at play here. Maintaining their digital footprint is so capital-intensive that it fundamentally altered how they viewed the Warner Bros. Discovery acquisition.
Right, because when Paramount Skydance put together their bid, Netflix totally had the cash flow to challenge it.
They did. But they chose extreme financial discipline. By walking away, Netflix ensured their debt-to-EBITDA ratio stays exceptionally safe at just 1.0 times.
And just to clarify for everyone, that measures how many years of earnings it takes to pay off their debt.
Yes. And for a media company of this scale, that leverage is remarkably pristine.
I understand the discipline, I really do. But I have to challenge the logic of what they left on the table here. Like, you spent a decade building a moat, and then you just step aside and let Paramount take Warner Bros.
It's definitely a bold move.
Yeah, I mean, they passed on the entire Harry Potter universe. They passed on DC Comics, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. They passed on the entire HBO Prestige television library. Didn't Netflix just hand their biggest competitor the exact weapons needed to cross that $20 billion moat? Like, if I'm Paramount and I now have Batman and Harry Potter in my arsenal, suddenly that Netflix moat doesn't look so impenetrable anymore.
It is arguably the biggest strategic gamble in modern entertainment history. Netflix is betting that their Open Connect distribution technology, their recommendation algorithm, and their sheer volume of daily user engagement will trump legacy intellectual property.
So I think the platform itself is stronger than the IP.
Right. They are betting they can engineer the next big cultural phenomenon internally, rather than paying a massive premium and taking on billions in debt to acquire an old one. But the risk you are pointing out is very real, and Wall Street definitely knows it.
Because if Paramount and Warner Bros. Combine forces, they finally have the scale to fight back.
Exactly. The market is acutely aware that this newly emboldened Paramount WBD giant could easily spark a new wave of content cost inflation.
Meaning aggressive bidding wars.
Yes. If these titans start bidding wars for top-tier acting talent, showrunners, and especially live sports rights, Netflix's beautifully disciplined margin expansion could stall out entirely. If they have to suddenly spend $25 billion instead of $20 billion just to maintain their market share, the math falls apart.
Wow. So the stakes are incredibly high, and the market is demanding proof that skipping the Warner Bros. Deal was the right call. Which brings us to the imminent catalyst dropping in just a few days.
Yes. Mid-April brings the Q1 2026 earnings report, and the top-line revenue is projected to hit roughly $10.5 billion for the quarter.
That's a massive number.
It is, but honestly, the total revenue number is secondary. The market fully expects them to hit that. The real battleground, the metric that will dictate the entire narrative of the stock, is the advertising revenue.
Ah, right. This goes back to that $3 billion annual ad target we discussed earlier.
Yep. Netflix has to mathematically prove they are on track for that $3 billion run rate. That means they need to demonstrate their in-house ad tech is capable of pulling in roughly $750 million per quarter later this year.
And if they manage to do that,
If they come out in this Q1 report and prove their ad monetization is accelerating and those premium CPMs are holding strong, the market will forgive the Warner Bros. Pass. In fact, if the ad engine proves viable, the stock could easily re-rate back up to a 45 times PE multiple.
because they will have proven they have a highly profitable, self-sustaining new growth engine that doesn't require taking on the massive debt of buying legacy studios.
Precisely. But that 37 times premium multiple they are trading at right now leaves absolutely zero room for an operational stumble.
Right. There's no safety net.
Exactly. If their ad scaling misses the mark, or if their forward guidance suggests that the new Paramount WBD behemoth is already driving up the baseline cost of content, well, the market reaction will be swift and unforgiving.
How far could it drop?
We could see the stock plummet well below $85. The narrative of their financial discipline will flip from visionary management to catastrophic missed opportunity overnight.
So to distill this entire saga down for you, Netflix today, at $99 a share, is a wildly profitable juggernaut. Over the last 5 years, they have tripled their operating profit to $15.3 billion.
Yeah, they built an undeniable global moat.
Exactly. Dodging telecom tolls with their Open Connect network and sustaining a $20 billion content flywheel. And when faced with the temptation to buy legacy IP like Warner Bros., they chose extreme financial discipline. They're betting their entire corporate future on scaling their own ad platform, pushing their margins past 31%, and pivoting hard into live events to drive their next chapter.
It really is a masterclass in corporate transition, and for anyone analyzing this space, there's a profound lesson here about the realities of market mechanics. A genuinely spectacular company, firing on all cylinders and throwing off billions in cash, is not guaranteed a soaring stock price.
Which is crazy to think about, but true.
Yeah, when your past successes create insatiable expectations, and those expectations eventually outpace the physical reality of how fast a mature 300 million user business can grow, the financial gravity gets very punishing. The absolute velocity is incredible, but Wall Street ruthlessly penalizes the lack of acceleration.
It fundamentally changes how you look at a balance sheet. And it leaves me with one final provocative thought for you to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. We spent this whole time analyzing Netflix strictly in the context of the streaming wars against Paramount, Warner Bros., and Disney. But look at what they are actually building. Between global live sporting events, the integration of video gaming, and the fiscal rollout of real-world Netflix houses, maybe our core assumption is flawed.
How so?
Well, if they successfully blend streaming, live sports, and real-world physical retail experiences into one inescapable ecosystem, maybe their true future competitors aren't Disney Plus or Paramount at all. What if the next phase of the streaming wars isn't about digital content libraries, but is actually a battle for the total experiential lifestyle? Like, if Netflix wants to be the default setting for your entire leisure life, both on the screen and off it, what if their real rivals in the next decade are hardware lifestyle titans like Apple, or the physical footprint of giants like Disney Parks?
Now, that is a fascinating way to look at it.
Something to think about as we wait for those April earnings to drop. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep looking under the hood, and we'll catch you next time.